It's just amazing. I never thought we would be in this place. And it's people like you that help us and help St. Jude provide for a family like ours. St. Jude is like the gold at the end of a rainbow. And we are so grateful and thankful for everything.
Okay.
Finding cures,
All right.
saving children.
Here
Learn
we
more
are, here we
at
are, here we are.
stjude.org.
Finally.
Hi, I'm Morgan Fairchild, and I am a lifetime lover of animals. I've rescued every pet I've ever had, so I know firsthand that when you adopt a shelter pet and make them a member of your
Not a problem, sir. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
families,
Okay.
ABC,
that
testing.
of your pet's
Thank
life as
you.
well.
Thank you.
The champions at American
Sounds great.
have
Okay,
been
great.
helping animals for more
Wonderful.
than 140 years.
How much time do we have?
Whether
About a minute?
certifying the humane treatment of farm
less?
animals, rescue,
About a minute and 10 seconds.
Okay, great.
ensuring the safety
Thank
of animal
you.
stars on screen, or protecting our planet's endangered species.
Ah.
They go above and beyond to
Hello,
further their mission
everybody. How
and
you
make the
doing
world
over
a
here
kinder
on
place for animals.
The
Please
Santita
consider
Jackson
adopting a
Show
shelter
YouTube
pet
channel.
and supporting American Humane.
Social Security is with you through life's journey. Get to know us at socialsecurity.gov. We are there, day one, with baby names and a gift that lasts a lifetime. We are there as you grow, protecting you and those you love. We are there when you get your first job, helping you
Pastor
to save for the
Thurston.
future. We are there when you marry your sweetheart
Yes,
and
right.
explore your new life together. We are there if the unexpected happens, to help you see life from a new perspective. We are there
30 seconds.
to start your
Okay.
next chapter,
Here
to
we
make
go.
sure you get off to a great start. And we are there when you lose your soulmate, to help make sure you will be all right. We are with you through life's journey. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. Get to know us and see what you can do online.
10 seconds.
Security.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Stand by.
WCPT 820, Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. AM 950 Radio is my home for the North in Minneapolis, St. Paul. WCPT, I'm right here in Chicago, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. Keep it locked right here. You're going to get the latest and the greatest when the DNC comes to town in the summer of 2024. Cannot wait, cannot wait. Cannot wait. And the great latest and the greatest in politics and social and cultural issues too. So I want you to call me right now. Call me and let's talk about how the Bible is used or misused in this Mideast conflict. Indeed, many Christians, not the right-wing evangelicals, but many other religious scholars are saying that Netanyahu has abused the Bible to make his point, to justify genocide. And then the U.S. Congress is now putting on the table anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And a lot of people are very alarmed by that. So we'll be talking about that at the bottom of the hour. I want to know what your thoughts are about this, because so much is wrapped up in this conflict, right? So much, so much, so much. And you just, and so much of it is like biblical, right? But for those of us who are not theological scholars, and I certainly am among those, I am not one. I read the Bible, I've gone to Sunday school. Yeah, I consider myself to be biblically literate, but I'm not a scholar. Scholars have said, as Pastor Stephen Thurston has said, wait a minute, for those of us who've really done a deep dive on the study, there has been an abuse here. And, Pastor Thurston, I'm going to ask you about covenants, because the covenant gives you, it gives you certain, if you don't break the covenant, you get certain blessings, but with the blessings come obligations. You're not supposed to sit on top of people, right? You're supposed to help to lead people. And we have to talk about that today. And what about anti-Semitism, equating anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism? What do you think about that? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let's go to some of these headlines. The U.S. set a grim record for mass shootings in a single year. The 37th and 38th shootings this year, in which 4 or more victims were killed, happened on Sunday. It's the highest number of mass killings with a gun since at least 2006. The latest deaths brought the 2023 total to 197, not counting the shooters. Yet another record. But that accounts for only a tiny percentage of U.S. gun deaths. Israel's military is pushing into the southern Gaza Strip where they told the Gazans to go. Wow, what are they to do? Israel has called the new phase of its war in Gaza after a pause ended Friday. This is their new phase. The UN chief said yesterday that civilians have nowhere safe to go. Now, Israel told them to go to the south, and now they're bombing the south. How does that work? In the West Bank since October 7th, nightly Israeli raids in the Jenin refugee camp have killed dozens of Palestinians. And remember, over this weekend, in one 24-hour period, at least 700 Palestinians were killed by the IDF. Not to mention, nearly 16,000 Palestinians have been killed. 1.8 million have been displaced. They don't have enough restrooms. They don't have enough showers. Now, if the bombs don't get them, disease will. Got to continue to stay focused on this story, everybody. The U.S. could soon run out of money to support Ukraine. Funding will dry up in weeks, the White House told Congress yesterday. It said that it would kneecap Ukraine in its war with Russia. The Biden administration has requested around $61 billion for Ukraine. A Senate vote on the request is expected this week. The Supreme Court seemed torn about a Purdue Pharma bankruptcy plan. The justices questioned the plan, which would allocate billions of dollars to ease opioid crisis, but it would also shield the Pickler family from future lawsuits, allowing them to keep the billions they made off of the opioid crisis and other pharmaceuticals. The bankruptcy fight is part of a reckoning over the role of businesses in an unprecedented public health crisis. A ruling is expected by early summer. What do you think about that? Math scores for U.S. students hit an all-time low on an international exam, the PISA exam. Given to students in 81 countries, was the first comparison of global achievement since the pandemic upended education. 15-year-olds in the United States had a 13 percentage point drop, a plunge in math scores between 2018 and 2022, but the U.S.'s relative ranking still improved compared with other countries. Wow. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 41 degrees. We can expect snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 35 degrees, cloudy. And in the NFL, the Bengals 34, the Jaguars 31, and an overtime win, a thriller. In the NBA, well, the Chicago and Minnesota teams are quiet until tomorrow night. In the NHL, the Predators will be playing Chicago, and the Wild will be playing the Flames. And why did undefeated Florida State not make the playoffs? You know I'm going to examine that. Because, I don't really keep up with college football anymore, except for the MEAC conference, because Pastor Stephen Thurston and I was black students, so, that's like a big thing for us. Going to Bayou Classics and things like that. That's great. Isn't that right, Stephen? We get down to the crown at our homecomings, and you have tens of thousands, if not 100,000 plus at the Southern University game. That's been iconic for years. Howard's game, Morehouse's game. When people come in from everywhere, if you went to an HBCU, you are there, right?
Yes.
Because you're going to bump into your friends.
You're not there for the game. You're there for the fellowship.
Wait a minute, and to get dressed.
That's it.
Oh, my goodness. The first time I saw a woman with a full-on silk outfit was at a Howard football game. I could not wait to get back. Well, I was a freshman. It was my first football game. And I could not wait to get back to the dorm to tell my parents. I was like, wow, seriously? My father said, please don't do that. Don't. She was splendid and resplendent in her sartorial glory. How you doing? The author of Mirror Moments. Everybody put Mirror Moments under your Christmas tree. It will bless you. Boy, taking a look in that mirror. Oh, you get upset with somebody else and, ooh, look at who I see. Me? Pastor Thurston, how you doing?
All is well today. Excited to be with you as normal. And I want to help the people to recover from rejection. We're getting ready for a new year, and some people have experienced some stuff in 2023. Rejection may have been a part of that. I want you to get over
You're on mute.
get better and live through it so that 2024 can be even better. Many people, they enter relationships seeking and expecting unconditional love, often subconsciously hoping to salve unmet needs and wounds from BDS, your childhood. Unfortunately, the storyline doesn't always lead to a happily ever after, as we find ourselves running into the relational roadblock of rejection. From the departure of a spouse to being fired from a job or snubbed by friends or even ostracized by family, rejection, Santita, can hurt and more than we expect it to. Science actually reports that sensitivity to emotional pain resides in the same area of the brain as physical pain. And so love can stimulate such strong, feel-good neurochemicals that rejection can actually feel like the withdrawal that people experience when they're exiting drug addiction. And so if you suffer from low self-esteem, rejection can devastate you. If you deal with codependency issues, rejection can cause your world to crumble. And here's the good news, though. You'll recover. Yes, you'll get through this. You'll get to the other side. Some estimates say that in about 11 weeks after the experience, you'll begin to feel better, but the same time frame is dependent upon a few factors: duration of the relationship, self-worth, attachment style, the degree of intimacy and commitment, and the foreseeability of that detachment. So don't think, hey, I'm at 11 weeks, Stephen. I haven't gotten past this. Hey, everybody's a little different. That's just a broad stroke, an average of the time frame that many people spend moving through that space. Now, rejection leads to something that's called grief. And I want us to know that it's natural and normal. So I need you to honor that stage and those feelings instead of trying to or expecting yourself to just move on. Grief is a process, as I shared with us last week. The road to recovery won't necessarily be in the fast lane, but know that your actions will play a role in how long this process takes, as well as if you grow from the experience. So first, you need to cut off contact with the one or the ones who rejected you. I know that's hard to hear, but you got to do it. That means stop stalking their social media page too. Number two, second, list the benefits of the relationship ending. I need you to list that out so you can see it and process it. And then third, avoid triggers that unnecessarily bring up the painful feelings. Now, unfortunately, the greatest damage rejection causes is usually self-inflicted. After the rejection experience, we call ourselves names, lament our shortcomings, and become disgusted with ourselves. And it's when our self-esteem is hurt the most that we go on and we damage it further. I get it. Rejection is never easy, but knowing how to limit the psychological damage it inflicts and how to rebuild your self-esteem will help you recover sooner and move forward in life with confidence. So let me leave you with some intentional, internal, proactive strategies that will pave the way for your restoration. Number one, have zero tolerance for self-criticism. You can focus on the problem or problems without being fixated on them. Number two, don't take it personal. Most rejections are due to fit and circumstances. An exhaustive examination of your deficiencies in an effort to understand why things didn't work out is unnecessary, and it can actually be misleading. Number three, revive your self-worth. When your self-esteem takes a hit, remind yourself of what all you do have to offer, what all you do bring to the table. Affirm the aspects of you that you know are valuable. And then finally, number four, boost your feelings of connection. Rejection destabilizes our need to belong, leaving us feeling unsettled and socially untethered. Make sure that you have a community to connect with outside of that relationship, outside of that work environment, outside of that small friend circle, your flossy posse, your inner crew. Make sure that you've got some community that can be there for you as a source of support as you're kind of rebounding from that rejection. The good news today is that rejection happens, but you can definitely recover from it. I hope you have an amazing day.
I like that. I appreciate that. And those are the kinds of things. That's Pastor Stephen Thurston, everybody. Facebook Live every Friday. It's still at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time?
Yeah. Every Friday, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on my Facebook page. That's Stephen with a PH, Stephen Thurston. Find me there. And you can always go back and catch previous videos. They're all stored there on Facebook on my page.
I love that. Those are the kinds of things that I need to go to church for, because I need that kind of help. You know, because it's practical. It's practical. And that's one of the things that I love about your ministry. It's very practical and practicable, right? I mean, no, because that's what I need. I need to know, people break up and they make up during the holidays. How do I handle that? And that's a real thing. That's a very real thing. And so everybody, just think about that. But get mirror moments, because he digs down deep on those issues. Sending you so much love, Pastor Stephen Thurston.
Back to you. I love you. Thank you.
I love you. I love you. I love him. I've known him so long, all my lives, and then some. Hey, I've got Dr. Shanina Knighton, but Pastor Stephen Thurston, before you go, I came across a report that says that the new hot spot, we're going to have to talk about this with you and Dr. Knighton and so many others. The South is the new epicenter of the new HIV crisis. Didn't know that. We're looking at COVID and all these other things. HIV, so many of these other issues are still with us. But Dr. Shanina Knighton, she was teaching over in Saudi Arabia last week. We're so proud of her, the internationally renowned international. Go girl. So what's on your mind today? Having changed your perspective on everything, having been out the country, seen some other things, and having dealt with people who see you differently, right?
Yes, no, beautiful things. Okay, it has been and I'll keep explaining that it's so much that I'm still debriefing. But I think it's important, Santita. I know that we've been talking about COVID, RSV, common cold, allergies being amongst us right now, but I also think that what cannot be ignored is the pattern of what's going on with this, I would say, mysterious wave of childhood pneumonia that is surging right now in China. That is unusual, but it's taken on a similar pattern of COVID-19. The reason why I am bringing this up now is because
You're on mute.
and I both know that February 29th of 2020, we were experiencing the first case of COVID-19 in the U.S., for which it resulted in a death in Seattle. And by the time it had broke in the news and it was popular, the habit had already started here within our own country. So me, of course, within the vein of prevention, want to make sure that we are thinking through that it is coming. It's inevitable. It's one airplane right away. But how do we make sure that we are protecting our children? Oddly enough, when I was out of town, and I'll never forget, me and Robert was at the airport, Robert taps me on the shoulder to look over, and there's a kid that is literally, I kid you not, eyes bloodshot red, and is just vomiting on the ground at the airport. And the mother is just looking away as if nothing is happening. And I'm like, baby is really sick. You're talking about coughing controllably and everything. And so then when the reports broke out about this child pneumonia with this respiratory illness, it made me wonder what is going on. And so the thing is even though we know that there are common pathogens, meaning harmful germs that will be responsible for infections. When we're looking at this new surge of pneumonia, we have to make sure that we're equipping our children with making sure that they are aware that other children at school may be sick and that they should still be cleaning their hands. And if there is a significant amount of kids at school that is sick or that are starting to be out of school, that it is important for them to put on their mask, even though some schools are mask optional. Having that conversation with your child about being safe, opposed to being, let's say, maybe ridiculed because of self-esteem, from the standpoint of them being one of the only kids that don't have it, could be a matter of them being safe in a situation where we may be embarking upon new sorts of outbreaks over here in our own country within the next couple of months.
Wow. I mean, and I don't know what it is. People bring out their children. Well, a lot of people have a lot going on. You bring out your child and you know the child's very sick, and I don't know. I mean, some people are just desperate to get to where they need to go. I don't know. God bless them. God bless them. But I think that if we made healthcare a right all over the world, things would function very differently, Dr. Knight. They really would. We'd be very different.
I do agree.
It's not a right. It's a privilege. It's a privilege, and you know it, because certain medicines, certain treatments are available to the wealthy and to the well-heeled and to the politically connected. A whole world of medicine exists that most of us cannot even imagine. Can't even imagine. When you go to the Mayo Clinic, it doesn't even smell like a hospital. And you don't have to come outside, everybody. You go through the tunnels and go from one hospital to the next. And it feels like a hotel. And then the hotel's connected to the hospital. I mean, wow. Cleveland Clinic's the same way. You know that. That's where you are. And it's just a lot. Everybody, let's talk about this first topic. Is Prime Minister Netanyahu abusing the Bible to impress U.S. evangelicals? A lot of people saying, yes, he is. He's abusing the Bible. What do you call us at 773-763-9278? Back in just a minute. Santita Jackson. Oh, boy. Well, you know what? I can't wait to hear your impressions, because I can hear that this trip has had a profound impact upon you.
Say that one more time.
I cannot wait to hear your impressions. I can hear that this trip has had a profound impact upon you.
It has. And so, yes, no, absolutely. I didn't give you a call yesterday, but I'm going to call you today. Because we got to spend some time. I will. Look, after you're done with your show, I sure will.
No, I'm working throughout the day, but I will make that space for you, because I hear you. Because this is really important. That you have these trips that really do. You can have something can happen that can completely change your life. How you look at everything and how you look at yourself. And that's really what it comes down to. You look at yourself differently, and you say, wait a minute, hold on. I'm viewed differently across this world. Like, wait a minute, people see me as Dr. Knighton. And we deal with sexism and all of that, but it's like, it's a different thing when you are, just when you don't have to deal with, the yoke of racism in the United States it's a deep thing. And you feel it very, very strongly. And it's my country. I love it. But I spent enough time for prolonged periods of time outside of the United States to know that when I get back to the United States, sometimes I feel things that make me go, wow, this is heavy up in here. Tough. Really,
absolutely.
Really tough. And it gets tiring. It does. It really does. And so you have increasing numbers of people who are leaving, increasing numbers of African Americans who are leaving the United States. because they're like, you know what, I'm tired now. And, as a pastor friend of ours said, even clouds run out of rain.
That part.
That part.
Yeah.
That part. Let me see. Do I have Reverend Jeanette Wilson with us? Reverend Dr. Uri and Dwight McKee?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Dwight, are you there? Reverend Dr. Uri? Okay. Let me know who's there. Trying to do this mic check.
Reverend Wilson and Mr. McKee are on.
Okay, great. Okay.
Still trying to get a hold of Dr. Yuri.
Okay, well, let me know when you get him.
Will do. Okay. 30 seconds.
Okay.
Mm. 10 seconds. Stand by.
Mm-hmm.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you. Today, we're going to be talking about Zionism, anti-Zionism being equated with anti-Semitism. That is a resolution that is pending in Congress right now. What do you think about that? That can have tremendous consequences, and I want to know what your thoughts are about it. But right now, the interesting thing about the Middle East is that it hits us where we live, politically, socially, culturally, and in terms of our belief system, our faith, our religion. And so we've always been taught, really, whatever your faith tradition, about the promised land and about chosen people. And so and most of us are not biblical scholars. So when you have a Benjamin Netanyahu using the Bible, and then biblical scholars say, wait, he's misusing the Bible. You got to pay attention to that, because most of us don't do a deep dive on the Bible. Most of us do not do that. And so let's talk about this electronic Intifada report and many others. When I started digging, I just found so much. They said in his press briefing on the 27th of October, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who used to live in Philly. Did you all know that? He was raised there in Philly, in part. Well, he cited a biblical reference to Amalek in the context of the destruction of Hamas and to eradicate this evil from the world. This pseudo-religious spin may have confused, the writer continues to write, Donald Wagner. In fact, he is a retired Presbyterian minister, Reverend Dr. Wagner. This pseudo-religious spin, as he called it, may have confused all but his ultra-right religious followers, both Jewish and Christian Zionists. Netanyahu continued, "We remember and we are fighting. Our soldiers are part of a legacy of Jewish warriors that goes back 3,000 years. Now, what appeared bizarre," Reverend Dr. Wagner continues, "to many was a highly intentional religious justification for Israel's ethnic cleansing or genocide of Gaza's Palestinian women, men, and children. In fact, 2/3 of those who've been killed have been women and children. The annihilate Amalek theme invokes support from the divine in this modern crusade to exterminate them, interpreted today as every Palestinian. Netanyahu's base of political support among militant settlers finds inspiration from these violent biblical texts. So, what do you think about that? And what about the promised land? And what about the covenant that promises the promised land? And what if the covenant gets broken? Do you still get the promised land? Well, I said, let me go to two people who have studied the Bible, who've done that deep dive. We've got Reverend Dr. Jeanette Wilson, who's also a lawyer, so she understands what we're looking at from the legal perspective, but she is an ordained minister. And I'm so glad that you're with us today. Of course, you are from the Maple Park. I mean, many of us know you from Rainbow Push, being the head of the Push Excel program, but you are a pastor at Maple Park United Methodist Church here in Chicago. Dwight McKee, brilliant political and biblical scholar. Let me start with you, Reverend Doctor. Excuse me, not Reverend Doctor, but Reverend Jeanette Wilson, Esquire. What do you make of many people when he made the reference to Amalek? Number one, what is Amalek? But when he made the reference, it was unsettling to people because they said, are you using this particular instance in the Bible to justify genocide? Talk to us. And then many people objected.
Well, I think if you look at the Old Testament in particular, there were a number of battles that the people of God were forced to deal with in warring countries. You know, when you look at our nation today, you have different positions of power all over the world, and as people seek power, they oppress other people in their efforts to accumulate land or resources rather than negotiating with people, as Reverend Jackson has done. There are forces political forces all around the world today and then that decide, I want this particular piece of property, I want this land, and therefore I will just take it. And so when you look at this Old Testament text, we had a different kingdoms in the Old Testament that fought with each other about who was the most powerful and who was entitled to the land resources. Many of the fights that
You have a caller.
today and that we saw in biblical times were about access to land and resources as people moved around from place to place. You know, our biblical ancestors were nomadic, meant they moved from place to place. And the question is, God gave us support and opportunities in various places. And so here you have with the second, I think he used 2 Samuel, the 15th chapter, where the there's a reference to God told Saul to defeat the Amalekites, and therefore there's this idea that God is suggesting that we annihilate a population and wipe them out. And it's really taken way out of context.
Okay. Well, Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, you have to be very careful when you go to those scriptures, because you notice he's very selective about what scriptures he chose to operate in. Because the Jews lost to the Assyrians, and then they got captured by the Babylonians. And then ultimately the Romans threw them out of Israel and took the whole land, which is how come they're in the situation they're in today. And so if you take it to its logical conclusion, that one war is not the whole story. You set yourself up for the rest of those scriptures that did not necessarily work to Israel's advantage when they dealt with, other countries. That was a very small country that they dealt with when God told them, to kill everybody, and a very pagan country and a country that had its own
history of child abuse and burning kids. And I mean, there was a real reasons he focused on that country. But in a broader sense, as the scriptures evolved and the Israelis had to fight, the Jews had to fight larger countries with more capability and more military capacity, they lost those values, those battles severely. The Syrians put them into bondage and split open the kingdom. The Babylonians captured them and kept them in bondage for 70 years, did not let them out. And ultimately in 70 AD, the Romans just came in and decimated the whole land and ran them completely out of Israel. So you have to be very careful how you read those scriptures and where you fit in. And you cannot be that selective because you have to be careful what you wish for. That thing will double cross you and take you somewhere else.
But this is a real movement in the American church, the Zionist movement, particularly when you have John Hagee and those like that. Many of the big ministers we see on television are Christian Zionists. And this appeals to them directly. Politically, Dwight, what is this meant to do?
It's meant to justify Israel's position and to reinforce why the United States has to get involved in behalf of Israel. It's really a legitimization of colonialism, which they've always done with the Bible, which these white evangelicals have always done with this chosen people manifest destiny. God has given us the right to this land. My country 'tis of thee, from sea to shining sea. We have a history of that, of using the Bible to justify our secular ambition. And when it's about land and oil and resources, the only way to really give that justification is to find it somewhere in the Bible, distort it, and say, God has given us dominion over this. Therefore, we have a divine right to take your land, to subjugate you, to kill you, and to call it freedom, justice, and American way, and in God we trust. And so it's no different that they're doing there than they did with the American the natives here when they took their land, justified it with the Bible, and put us in slavery, and justified that with the Bible too. That's how they operate. That's not new.
Let me go to Lee. I think we just got Reverend Dr. Yuri, but before I come to you, I've got Lee who's called in. Lee, what's on your mind today?
This is crazy, but I'll tell you anyway. I spent ever since Trump was inaugurated, all I've done is research what's wrong with America. And now I figured out what's wrong with the world. And, it's all come to me by coincidence. And one of the most important coincidences was listening to your show. Having me driving to a men's fellowship breakfast from our church early in the morning. So I turned you on. That's the only reason I had to put this radio on before 9 o'clock. And when I heard you, I thought, wait a minute, this is religion. But then I kept thinking, no, this isn't religion. This is facts. All of this is facts. And it's clear. There's no distortion. There's no, bias or anything. You're an amazing source for knowledge. I want to tell you that I think we should recommend that your show be segmentized by topic and then played in classrooms instead of history books. Because the history books, if you go to Texas, they have laws that you can't talk about racism and states' rights related to the Civil War. It's what we call that BS instead of the truth. So these people really have to know the truth or they're not going to live right. And frankly, your show gives You have all the experts on. I don't know if you realized that you were going to do this, but you really brought a totally unfiltered message of history and reason. It just doesn't exist anywhere, as far as I know. I mean, I've looked everywhere, and there are agencies that do things in certain subject areas, like common dreams and so on. But you just do it all. I mean, every issue that comes up, you cover it, and you cover it with all the experts, and none of them are biased or anything else. So, you're better than books, to be honest.
Oh, bless your
I'm
heart.
sorry, I shouldn't be throwing this out, but
No, I appreciate
you
it.
just struck me so much. I'm sorry.
No, I appreciate it. All we try to do is spread truth, right?
Right, yes.
And so, and that's it. And thank you for just being so kind to us this morning. Means a whole lot.
Well, let me say one more thing before I get off.
Yes, sir.
When you had your brother Jonathan on, yesterday or the day before, I was listening and I thought to myself, my God, there's something in this message that's just driving me nuts. And then the bell rang. I said, integrity. He has integrity. He doesn't have it. Nobody's bent on him. He solely focuses on exactly what should be right, and he doesn't care about anything else. And you're the same way. And I thought, if this country had integrity, we'd have no more problems. I'm sorry. I'm probably trying to be too nice. To be honest, I have a lot to tell you the next time I meet you at Rainbow Porch, if that's possible.
Well, come on over. You're so sweet, and thank you for that. I love you. Appreciate you more than I can say.
Oh, and I love your mother too. She's an amazing woman.
Well,
I thought Jesse's amazing too. I shouldn't leave him. I'm sorry.
No, they're a heck of a combination. Our parents. So we thank you for that, because they really tried to press us, Dwight McKee, as you well know, on integrity. And I mean, because that's all you have at the end of the day. I keep hearing you can kill a person, but you can't kill a movement. You can kill a person, but you can't kill an idea. And only what you do for Christ will last. Remember when we used to sing that at Fellowship, Dwight McKee? And we used to sing that growing up. And and that's just truth. So sending you so much love. Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, is the Bible being abused by Prime Minister Netanyahu to impress U.S. evangelicals? I mean, and it's being used to justify genocide.
Well, I think well, first, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Is the Bible being used? Yeah, the first word that comes to mind is again, right? But it's typical when you have issues of moral conflict. Many times what you will see is the claim of divine right to justify immoral behavior. We've seen it not only in religion, but we've often seen it in politics. We've often seen it in case law. You see it in rulings that have come from the Supreme Court going back in history, that God ordered things this way. And so you cannot question how we go about doing what we're doing, because this is ours by divine right. And so if you have an issue with it, don't take it up with us, take it up with your God. And so it's often the way that in a cynical sort of way, you dismiss dissent, you dismiss critique, you dismiss moral responsibility and moral obligation, and then you use this false justification of divine right? Because imagine now, why would you take the divine right as the head of the state of Israel and present it to right-wing evangelicals? Well, that's the same crowd by dissent that continue to say and even behave as though women don't have a place in religion, and black folk are supposed to be happy being slaves. And so what we've seen throughout history is this use of false interpretation, false manipulation. And as part of the process, whenever we've dealt with colonization, the two systems that would often be taken hold of first of those who would eventually be the colonized is their systems of education and their systems of religion. We're going to impose our teaching and impose our religion on you, and we're going to call it divine right in the process. And it's going to put you in a position of internal conflict. If you don't know your own faith, and if you don't know, have your own educational system, we're going to try to put you in a quandary where now you're not going to buck the system, because to buck the system is equated with bucking God. That's what's going on here, and he's playing to a political audience in a campaign season that's going to try to make it more difficult, as we're starting to hear now the Biden administration lean in. I don't know what that means yet, but lean in a little bit more on Israel in terms of accountability as they are bombing now southern Gaza. This has always been a land grab. And so what did we hear from our First Nation, our Native brothers and sisters? Said when the Pilgrims got here, we had the land, they had the Bible. After they got here, we had the Bible, and they got the land.
So what does all of this mean? I mean, what are the political implications of this, Dwight McKee? On this side, you've got John Hagee and others making the argument essentially for genocide from their pulpits every Sunday. What's the end game?
Well, the end game is going to be pressure on the administration to back down, because everybody is not a fundamental Christian, and other people read the Bible much differently than a lot of the fundamental Christians. And they don't have the same interpretation, and their interpretation is going to lead them to put more and more pressure on the administration to back down and to make adjustments, so that when you look at, for example, Biden's ratings right now, his poll numbers, they're at an all-time low, because other different denominations are beginning to see the contradictions in their behavior and challenging them on that, and many are forsaking them on that very thing. So even the young Jewish crowd that we're meeting with today, is they, and they're leading these demonstrations, they have a much different interpretation of these scriptures than even that Yahoo does, and even that Biden does. And they're becoming a major political force. The Islamic community is becoming a major force politically, and they're the margin of difference in these swing states like Michigan and Minnesota. And many of them are either going to stay out the race or go Republican and swing the race away from the Democrat, and be the reason that Biden is not the president again. And so there are major political implications in how you interpret these scriptures and how they play out in the public square.
Reverend Wilson, where do you see this going? I mean, is there a real discussion within Christendom, particularly in the United States, about this issue?
Yes, I think that what we have to look at, as Dr. Yuri and others have said, this is about power moves from kingdom to kingdom. When the scripture, the text in 1 Samuel 15 is talking about Saul, who rose to power by oppressing and taking land, if you will, and oppressing others in order that he might become the leader of the nation. And so people tend to forget that you have in all of our structures people who want to grab power more than they care about the indigenous people. You look at what's happening in Ukraine with Russia. It's not about making things better, making life better for people in Russia or Ukraine. It is about amassing control of resources and land. When you look at Haiti, how it has struggled over the years, and yet Haiti has been the basis for the liberation of America. And yet people have raped Haiti's resources of orchids and rice. You look at Africa, the continent of Africa, where all of our natural resources occur, and there are wars around that continent taking the natural natural resources, but trying to control the land upon which the resources exist. And so when you look at America, one of the most powerful nations in the world, America is now trying to figure out who can we control, really, so that we might maintain a position of power. Do we align ourselves? And these political alliances are based on power moves. It's like playing chess in real life. And so, yes, people are now looking at religion and our faith very different. We are now coming to a point in our history where the high holy days of most of the nation's religions are coming around the same time. And what do we say about no celebration in Bethlehem this Christmas? What do we say about that? And so Christians have to wrestle with our faith. Our Jewish brothers and sisters have to look at what does it mean to have Hanukkah starting shortly this month in the midst of so much war and violence. How do we interpret our Old Testament and our New Testament? And so these are some discussions that we must have. And then our children are questioning the very essence of our faith. And the books that we have given them, the Bible and the Torah, and they're trying to figure out what should they believe. A whole nother generation of people. So yes, it's politically, it says America must be very careful how we move at this moment. And I think that's why many of the faith leaders are suggesting that we move looking at a ceasefire and then a discussion for justice and righteousness, because all of our faiths talk about righteousness and justice and peace. And that's where America better align itself if we are to be the America that the founders and framers of the Constitution believed us to be.
Well, everybody, abusing the Bible is not new, but it has to stop. Let's talk about the U.S. House vote to declare anti-Zionism anti-Semitism. What will that mean? Well, what does it mean? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. My wonderful people, I'm going to let you and Reverend Dr. Yuri go.
Okay.
Okay, and we're talking about anti-Zionism. All right. So I thank
you so much, Santita.
Always. I'm glad you were able to be on this morning. I know you got a lot going on right now.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Talk to you later today.
Be good.
Hey, Yuri.
Yes, sir.
How you doing?
How are you? I'm good.
Pretty fine. How about you?
I'm all right.
Good.
Okay. All right, so we will have Dwight, Mark Fancher, and Leslie Williams. Leslie Williams, Dwight, is from Jewish Voice of Peace. She's an African-American woman who has converted to Judaism. She wrote a very interesting piece in Truth Out, really criticizing the Anti-Defamation League. Stop pretending to be a civil rights organization, she wrote. That people, they are under attack about their right-wing politics. So let me get right to that. And now you see Bernie Sanders has rejected a $10 billion aid for the extremist Netanyahu government. Interesting.
Attorney Fancher and Miss Williams is on.
Okay. Miss Williams?
Hello, how are you?
It's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know you got this crazy call in the middle of the night. Wait a minute. But I know, but that's how I end up doing it. I fall asleep and I, holding my phone, and Aaron is just so sweet. Alex, would you reach out to Reverend Yuri and see if he wants to join this here?
Okay, let me call him.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. And I loved he sent me links to your writings. I really, really, really appreciate your writings, and I look forward to meeting you. You're on with Attorney Mark Fancher from the National Conference of Black Lawyers in another life. He is the head of the Racial Justice Project. Okay, got to get my languages straight. Of the ACLU of Michigan. Brilliant attorney and opiner of all things relevant. And Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist. He's head of the Ma'afa Redemption Project here in Chicago.
Reverend Yuri's back on.
Okay, thank you. Reverend Yuri, let me send you some links to these articles, okay?
Okay.
Let me do this. I'm just going to send this to you right now. And so I'll come to you at the bottom of the hour, yes? Nearing that, just give you an opportunity to, I'll text it. Okay.
I'm going to listen to what Big Brother Dwight says, and I'm going to say what he says. He taught me my lines.
I think you better listen to what Big Sister Leslie Williams has to say. This incredible story that she's got. But I'm so glad that you're with us today. Really, really, really honored that you're with us. And wow, this is really fantastic. But I'm going to ask you how it is that you found yourself converting to Judaism. There's such a breadth and depth of spiritual expression within the Black community in particular, and within the Black American community. I think it's important for us to explore that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, did you want me to go into that now? Or you want to wait until the show starts?
I've got about two or 3 minutes. You can give us just as long as don't spend the best stuff on the air. Before we get on the air. But yeah, but how? I mean, what church were you raised in, and what prompted your conversion?
So I would say my father, who grew up in the Jim Crow South in Florida, he was part of a pretty traditional AME church background, but that was not something that he really practiced as an adult, and he was never a member of a church. And my mother was primarily a member of the Christian Science Church, which is, there's a whole story in there, but that was not something that spoke to me. And in fact, that was something that really became repellent and endangered my mother's health, and eventually, I think, contributed to her death. So I didn't really have a strong grounding in the Black church. But I did. I mean, I grew up largely in Hyde Park. I went to high school at the University of Chicago Lab School. So I had a lot of Jewish friends growing up. And both of my parents also had a lot of Jewish.
When were you in Lab?
74 to 78.
Oh, so you know a lot of my friends. Because I grew up over in the Highlands. Like Dee Town. My whole neighborhood went there. Everybody except my brothers and I, the Lewises went there. Look, everybody went to Lab. Except the Jacksons.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. All right.
The Jacksons, yes. But my mother in the 50s, she was very involved in a lot of the global liberation movements, and she had a lot of friends from Ghana and Botswana. And
1 minute.
Because of that, she was. She also had a lot of very left-wing Jewish friends. Mm-hmm. And my father said that growing up in the South, the only white people that he had any trust in at all were white Jews. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, at the time, they were facing almost as much discrimination and oppression as Blacks were. So that just always seemed like a very natural community to me. And I think particularly the focus
30 seconds.
And that's one thing that I always talk about when I talk about Israel and Zionism, because there's a principle in the Talmud that says essentially is his blood redder than mine? And the idea is that you don't have the right simply to protect your own life or your own comfort or your own
10 seconds.
safety to endanger the life or the safety of anyone else.
Stand by.
Another innocent person.
Stand by, Leslie, because I can't wait for you to explain that.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. Wow. Can you believe we're closing in on the end of the year? Can't believe Christmas is here. The religious season is here. All these holidays. Where did 2023 go? And now we're looking at the presidential season. I want you to keep it locked right here on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, because this is where you're going to get the best political talk anywhere. Indeed, during the last election cycle, the most time spent listening of any radio station in the Chicago area was WCPT. That's right. So Joan Esposito in the afternoon, Patty Vasquez in the evening, and just on and on and on, from sunrise to sunset and to midnight and all over again. We've got the best radio for you. So I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763 WCPT. I want to know what your thoughts are about anti-Zionism being equated with anti-Semitism. The U.S. House will be voting on such a resolution shortly. It's expected to go up for a vote this week. What does that mean? What is Zionism? What is anti-Zionism? What is anti-Semitism? The conflation of it all is now being disaggregated in this moment, in this post-October 7th moment. So let's talk about that. We've got a really, really interesting panel led by Leslie Williams, brilliant writer and thinker, who wrote a tremendous piece in Truth Out, Anti-Defamation League. Stop pretending to be a civil rights organization. Indeed, they have been under fire. But she's a young African-American woman, and you will still be young because we're in that same category, Miss Leslie.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, certainly young at heart. But she converted to Judaism, and she has a fascinating story, a very fascinating story. We cannot wait to talk with her and Dwight McKee, brilliant social scientist, and attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant writer and lawyer, and Reverend Dr. Todd Ewing, brilliant lawyer and pastor. So let's get right to it, everybody. Let's get to some of these headlines so we can get to the rest of the show. The U.S. set a grim record for mass shootings in a single year, everybody. The 37th and 38th shootings this year, in which 4 people or more, not including the shooters, happened on Sunday. Israel's military is pushing into the southern Gaza Strip, where they told everybody to go. 1.8 million refugees now, everybody. If the bullets and the bombs don't get them, the disease will. It's so tragic. Israel has called this new phase of its war, after they ended their pause in fighting on Friday. The UN chief said yesterday that civilians have nowhere safe to go. Indeed, the United Nations has said the most unsafe place in the world to be a child is now Gaza. The U.S. could soon run out of money to support Ukraine. Funding will dry up in weeks, the White House told Congress yesterday. It said that it would kneecap Ukraine in its war with Russia. The Supreme Court seemed torn about a Purdue pharma bankruptcy plan. Justices questioned the plan, which would allocate billions of dollars to ease the opioid crisis, but also shield the victim family, allow them to keep their millions as they made money from this crisis. Sad news about the math scores, everybody, for U.S. students. It hit an all-time low on an international exam, the PISA exam. Given to students in 81 countries, was the first comparison of global achievement since the pandemic upended education. 15-year-olds in the U.S. had a 13% plunge. In Chicago, we're going to see a high of 41 degrees. It will be snow showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 35 degrees and cloudy. And in the NFL, the Bengals in overtime were triumphant over the Jaguars, 34-31. The Timberwolves and the Bulls have the night off, but tomorrow night they'll be back on. In the NHL, the Predators will be facing off against Chicago, and the Wild will be facing off against the Flames. Before we get into the show, we're looking to, and they have found a challenger. That's right. Remember, AIPAC was putting in $100 million to find challengers to the squad. Well, Jamal Bryant It's not Jamal Bryant. I'm thinking of the pastor. Jamal Bowman now has a challenger. He just made a trip to Israel, and now he will be facing off against Jamal Bowman. You see how that's going to work. Can't wait to talk about that in the coming weeks. But if you want to buy a house, the big barrier to buying a house is saving the 20% to purchase your home. Most Americans just can't do it. It's just too expensive today. I mean, most of us, many if not most of us, are now using our credit cards to buy groceries. That's how tough it is. Most of us cannot afford to go to the emergency room. That's $400. We just don't have it. You don't have $2,000 or a few $100s for an emergency. So it is a tremendous opportunity that Team Hochberg is presenting to you. Instead of the 20% to put down on a home, instead of 10% or even 5%, all you need is 1% and no private mortgage insurance to purchase a home if you qualify for this program. 1% down, that's it. Up until now, saving for this down payment has been the downfall of most Americans. It's been the bane of our existences. But Team Hochberg now has a loan program to help all of you listeners, everyone within the sound of my voice and beyond, to become homeowners. That is a cornerstone of wealth in America. That is indeed the cornerstone of the American dream. That's what we have been told. So let's look at this, everybody. Team Hochberg wants to help you and everybody you know. If you want to help your child buy a house, if you need to buy a house, if you're looking to do something like that, well, guess what? Your coworkers, tell everybody about it. 1% down, no private mortgage insurance. If you're purchasing a home, do yourself a favor, call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com and find out about this. It's a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity, and do not let it go. Well, what about this new resolution that will equate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism? It's going to make it really tough for people. The U.S. House of Representatives is expected to vote on this week, possibly as soon as, maybe last evening, but that did not happen. It's a resolution declaring that anti-Zionism, quote, is anti-Semitism, a measure that Jewish peace campaigners have called deeply anti-Semitic. It's House Resolution 894. It embraces the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's controversial working definition of anti-Semitism, which, while not explicitly mentioning anti-Zionism, includes, quote, denying the English people their right, the Jewish people, their right to self-determination, and claiming that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. So, what about this House vote on declaring anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism? What does that mean? Some people are saying this is a cynical effort to conflate criticism of the government of Israel with anti-Semitism. Do you agree with that? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. We have got, of course, Dwight McKee with us, a brilliant social scientist, Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church National Leadership Team of Rainbow Push, and attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers. But we're joined by Leslie Williams, fascinating woman, and a brilliant writer, I must say. I was really struck by this piece in Truth Out, in which you declared that the Anti-Defamation League should stop pretending to be a civil rights organization. Indeed, they are coming under a fusillade of fire for a lot of their political positions, and for really positioning themselves as a civil rights organization, even though, it's interesting, in part of your biography as a young African-American woman who converted to Judaism. In fact, we have a lot of the same friends because you went to school with a lot of, you grew up with a lot of my friends, which is like really exciting to see, right? And you're from Jewish Voice for Peace. And you've been.
That is right.
And just talk to me. Anti-Zionism. What do you make of this resolution declaring anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, and how does that fit into your own faith journey?
Well, to begin with, anyone who says that anti-Zionism is the same as anti-Semitism is demonstrating a lot of ignorance about the history of Zionism. So Zionism, or political Zionism, really started in the 1800s with Theodor Herzl. And at the time, it was seen as a fringe minority movement within the Jewish community. It really was not until after the Holocaust that the idea of Zionism became accepted widely throughout the Jewish community. But there were many, many different movements. There was a kind of a social justice socialist movement called the Bund that was very opposed to Zionism. Many, many rabbis and Jewish religious figures were opposed to Zionism because they felt that the return of the Jewish people to Israel was something that God had to do, that it was not something that a secular movement should do. So, in dismissing all of the anti-Zionist movements within Judaism, this resolution and the claim that anti-Zionism is the same as anti-Semitism is really erasing a lot of Jewish history. And I would encourage readers to take a look at a fascinating book called Prophets Outcast, a century of dissident Jewish writing about Zionism in Israel, that contains a lot of the work of very thoughtful Jewish writers, including Albert Einstein, Hannah Arendt, Yuri Avneri, Noam Chomsky, Judith Butler, who have criticized Zionism and have refused to identify themselves as Zionism. And my own organization, Jewish Voice for Peace, has been officially anti-Zionist for several years and solidly in solidarity with Palestinian liberation. And we talk about a Judaism beyond Zionism. If you look at the history of the Jewish people, a lot of what we really think of as the quintessential values of Judaism developed in the diaspora. So, you had a religion that was initially based on temple cult sacrifices. It was very location-based. And after the Romans destroyed the temple and destroyed Jewish life in Palestine in the ancient times, the Jews were dispersed around the world. And really Judaism, rabbinic Judaism as we know it, with a focus on the home and with a focus on ethics, that is what really became Judaism. And, you'd asked about my conversion. A big part of what motivated me to convert was what I saw as the strong tradition of Jewish ethics and the strong focus on right behavior in this world as opposed to primarily focusing on the next world. And there's a Jewish principle in the Talmud that I've always loved, and to me it's always seemed to be a really strong rebuke to political Zionism. And it's the concept of, is his blood redder than mine? And essentially it's saying that you do not have the right to endanger an innocent person's safety or health or life simply because you feel your own safety or life is endangered. That you have no right to say that your blood is redder than anyone else's. And to me, that's a very profound rebuke to political Zionism as we see it, because Zionism, as it has been practiced in the 20th century, the 20th and the 21st century, has been essentially Israelis saying that their blood is redder than Palestinians, that their right to safety and security supersedes the right of Palestinians to safety and security. And so for me, converting to Judaism, converting to that ethical dimension of Judaism, which is what I see in Jewish activists from Jewish Voice for Peace and the Center for Jewish Nonviolence and If Not Now and Never Again Action. That to me is the Judaism that I want to be a part of, not a Zionism that is ethnically exclusive, that was intentionally designed to deprive a 750,000 people of their homes and in many cases their lives, all in the name of Jewish security.
Leslie Williams, everybody. So what do you make of, because some people are beginning to go after the ADLs. Now, they've always been right-wing, and you also mentioned, because we're from the same era, there was an absolute break with blacks and Jews over affirmative action, for example. Jews were over-indexing in terms of their numbers in terms of getting into these schools, but black people were shut out. I wish we could have met somewhere in the middle because there was no understanding of, because the thing is, as a as a Jewish person, you can pass into whiteness. As a black person, I can never do that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes,
yeah.
please.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up. There's another, I am a librarian in a previous life, so I always have to recommend books to people. But another book that I think particularly your listeners might be interested in is called Black Power and Palestine. And it traces the history of Black freedom movements and their connection to Palestine. And, the issue you mentioned about affirmative action, there were a lot of books and studies talking about what happened between the Black-Jewish Alliance, and you will often hear white Jews complaining about African Americans not supporting Israel because we marched with you in the civil rights movement. We saved you in the civil rights movement. And in fact, a couple of days ago, the actress Juliana Margulies got in trouble for saying exactly that she couldn't understand why Black people weren't supporting Israel after all that Jews had done for Black people, and that we must have been brainwashed into not supporting Jews because there was no possible reason that Black people could not be standing with Israel. But the fact is that if you look at Malcolm X and Tory Kwame and June Jordan, the Black Arts Movement, the Black Panthers, all of these groups were solidly in support of Palestine because they saw the history of Palestine as mirroring the colonization that had happened in Africa, that you had white European colonists going to a Black or brown country, expelling or dominating or oppressing and exploiting the indigenous residents. And so they clearly felt a very strong connection with Palestine. And although many white supporters of Israel claim Martin Luther King as one of their supporters, I think it's important. I mean, he did say many things in support of Israel back in 66, 67, but we have to remember that he died in 1968, not very long after the Six-Day War, and really before the occupation took place. So I think it's pretty difficult to say that Martin Luther King would have supported what became of Israel after his death.
Oh, it's not
I
difficult.
really doubt that he would have supported.
Wait. My parents worked for him. He wouldn't have supported this. Dr. King supported justice.
No, I mean,
it's just.
And he was against war.
Yeah.
And so to think that Martin Luther King would have been in support of a system that up till now has killed at least 16,000 Gazans. 800 Gazans have died just since the truce was broken a few days ago. There's no way that he would have supported that. And the majority of the Black civil rights and liberation figures from that time period were solidly in support of Palestine. But I think another thing to remember when you talk about the Black-Jewish Alliance, in the earlier days when white American Jews were more urban, when they were actually living in cities, when they were actually more in solidarity with the working class. There's the whole Jewish working class movement and labor movement and involvement in unions and everything. There was more solidarity. But through the 60s and 70s, as you said, the white American Jews can slip into white privilege, basically. And that was beginning to happen at towards the end of the civil rights movement. There was much more white flight to the suburbs, and many white American Jews were part of that white flight to the suburbs. So it's not really, I don't feel it's that Black Americans abandoned Jews. I feel that many white American Jews abandoned those urban progressive roots, and they accepted white privilege. They accepted that mantle of white privilege. And one thing that is extremely irritating to me, and I think to a lot of Black Americans, when this talk of anti-Semitism is brought up, and the ADL, of course, will talk widely about how much anti-Semitism there is and how much anti-Semitism there is in the Black community. There is anti-Semitism in the United States, but there is not institutional anti-Semitism the way there is institutional Blackness. So if you are white American and Jewish, all of the quality of life indicators, your ability to get a good education, your ability to get good health care, your ability to live in a safe community where you're not threatened by gun violence, your access to healthy food and supermarkets that have fresh vegetables and fresh meat, your ability to simply drive and not be arrested or shot by the police. None of those things affect white American Jews in the same way that they affect African Americans. So this determination on part of groups like the Anti-Defamation League to elevate anti-Semitism, to constantly talk about anti-Semitism the way this resolution does, as though it is the primary and most dangerous form of racism and oppression in the United States, is frankly ludicrous and really insulting to Black and brown people, and I would say not just African Americans, but Latino Americans, Muslim and Arab Americans. I know that those two things aren't the same, but they are racialized in the same way. Very insulting to groups that do routinely face institutional racism. So I think that's an important point for people to remember. And, the Anti-Defamation League, their primary mission is really supporting Israel. Now, they talk a good game about civil rights, but they have a history of spying and surveilling the African National Congress and the NAACP and SNCC. They have a history of targeting and attacking African Americans who say anything remotely critical of Israel, whether it's Keith Ellison or Mark Lamont Hill or Michelle Alexander or Cornel West. So to say that the Anti-Defamation League has in any way truly been a support to the Black community is, I think, a fallacy.
Yeah, I can tell you wrong. And that doesn't, it doesn't make you anti-Jewish. It makes me pro-truth.
No.
But hold that thought.
It makes you pro-truth.
I want this panel to respond to what they've heard from you. Just fascinating. Leslie Williams, everyone. Brilliant writer, brilliant actress, Jewish voice for peace. And my girl from Lab School. But I went to John J. Pershing Public School, but I'm not mad at you. All my neighbors went to school with you.
That's okay.
Of course it is.
We can still be fam.
Look, we're sisters because you went to school with my whole neighborhood. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
When you said lab, I'm like, wait a minute, when? I love it. Stay right there with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a moment. Well, Dwight and Mark Fancher and Reverend Dr. Yuri, I'm going to have you all respond, but why don't you all engage? We're on Facebook Live and on YouTube, Leslie, at this time. So crosstalk, just so to be mindful that people are listening to it, okay? So,
all right.
Be candid, but you know what I'm saying? The camera is candid. But Dwight, what do you think about what you've heard? I don't, want you to respond when we get on the other side.
So what do I think what I heard? Is your question?
Yes.
Oh, I think she's right on point. I think she's all of the salient issues, particularly on the civil rights, Jewish connection. And people don't talk about how, at some levels, how exploited it was. That a lot of the Jews locked in us because they needed our numbers. We needed their money, but they needed our numbers. And so they used us for political leverage. I mean, they paid for it. They paid discount prices for it. But their control of the Urban League and control of the NAACP and their control of many of the civil rights organizations allowed them not only to help us make some progress, as the Rosenwald did with Booker T. Washington, but it also gave them political leverage, and it is also by which even today they control the Democratic Party. They control the Democratic Party because it's them, the Jews' money, and the blacks' numbers. And that's what gives them such domination over that party that they've leveraged to extreme wealth and extreme power. So I think she touched on that very well. I like to elaborate on that, as a matter of fact. And Mark will understand that too. Mark, you want to kick in on that?
Well, why don't we save some of this till we get in on but just as long as you all don't spend your best stuff on this side, Leslie and Mark and Dwight and Todd. Thank you. Go on.
Yeah, no, the only thing I was going to say is that, one of the great crimes of Zionism, I think, is that it impacted the political culture of the Jewish community in that it hides a political agenda behind a religious facade. It's a very cynical, opportunistic kind of way of dealing. I mean, they will present themselves as allies, but when you have an ally, you regard them as somebody who's going to ride or die with you. They're going to stay with you through thick and thin because they're concerned about you as fellow human beings, and they want to see you succeed and to thrive, and they'll do whatever it takes.
1 minute.
You seem to find your way to their side only when the interests converge, when there's some benefit in it for you, but then you abandon them and then throw them under the bus once there's a conflict. That's not an ally.
Agreed. I just wanted to respond a little bit to the question of Jews and Jewish money in the Democratic Party.
30 seconds.
We tried very carefully to not fall into the anti-Semitic tropes, and I don't think that that's what you meant. But we try very hard not to fall into the anti-Semitic tropes of Jewish money controlling things. I mean, yes, it is very clear that there are
10 seconds.
Jewish people with money who support the Democratic Party. There are a lot of white people who are not Jewish
Stand by.
who support the Democratic Party. So I wouldn't exactly say that it's accurate.
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
To a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Special guest today, but part of the family after today, Leslie Williams, a Jewish Voice for Peace. Got to have you back on the show as often as you can get here. I know it's early. Don't hate me. Don't hate me. She's a brilliant writer and activist with Jewish Voice for Peace, and has a lot of really interesting things to say. Her own journey has been, it's a journey I think that we can all be on, because I think that we, Leslie, feel a lot of different things, and it depends upon your perspective and what you have lived. I mean, it's a funny thing. The more you find out about your parents, the more you can track a lot of stuff. I didn't, my mother's father's from the West Indies, and he left the United States because he felt it was so racist. He was like, I didn't grow up here. I don't want to be bothered with this. But he was also a Garveyite, right? So when I look at my mother's own politics, and I look at my father's politics, and racially he's very mixed, which is something that she brings up. She said, because when I met your father's family, many of them were white or looked white. So it was it's people come from a whole lot of different perspectives, right? I mean, and then you merge into this, these tributaries, lakes and streams come into a river, and then they move into an ocean eventually. But I just think that your story is just so fascinating. And it's one that we need to pay attention to, because I think we need to be open to these different traditions.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned Garvey and Garveyism, because there are some African Americans who make analogies between the Garveyite movement and the Zionist movement. And I will say this about Zionism and the attachment to Zionism, and also to Garveyism. I think when people have been oppressed and terrorized for generations, they've always been in the minority. They've always been overwhelmed. There is a very natural desire to be in the majority, to be in a place where your culture dominates and where you feel safe. And, I think we saw some of that in the Garvey movement, the Back to Africa movement. And there is some, I think, genuine sentiment among a lot of Jewish Americans and obviously Israelis to have that kind of community, to know that you're safe, that your culture dominates, you don't have to be afraid of anybody else. But I think the difference is, when I think about what our homeland is. So, I mean, according to 23andMe, my homeland is 90% West Africa. So, yes, I may think of that as the homeland. I want the ability to go visit there. I might want to live there at some point. But I would never say that I and people of my particular ethnic group have an exclusive right to live there, and that only people of my ethnic group should be able to have full and complete civil rights, should be able to walk on certain streets or drive in certain roads. And the people who live there that were from a different ethnic background should be locked into neighborhoods surrounded by checkpoints. So there's a difference between saying that it's your homeland and saying that it has to be exclusively your homeland and that you get exclusive rights from being in that homeland. And that, I think, is a fundamental difference between Zionism and other kind of movements like the Garveyite movement. But I understand why Zionism is so important to a lot of people, but I think it's honestly misguided. I mean, the idea, first of all, that this is making you safe. Since the 1920s and really the beginnings of what has been described as the Arab-Israeli conflict, at least 25,000, possibly 28,000 Jews have been killed in the various wars and resistance movements. So, you walk through Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, and one of the things that's really shocking is you see all these young 19, 20-year-olds carrying rifles openly. And everyone is given gas masks, and they have these regular security and bombing and air raid drills. Does that sound like a society where people feel safe? And, do people honestly think that they're safer in this heavily militarized enclave they've created than if they were living, say, in the United States? I don't see how that is a form of safety. And so one of the things that I've been working on with Parseo, the anti-Semitism from the framework of collective liberation, is looking at how we provide actual safety, not just for Jews, but for Muslims and Arabs and Black people and everybody else, how we work on a framework of collective liberation, addressing white supremacy, which is really far more of a threat to Jews than Palestinians are. And look at what would really provide safety and security. And resolutions like this one would simply go on and on about anti-Zionism and try to demonize Palestinian freedom songs, try to demonize the Palestinian chant from the river to the sea. None of that is really working to make Jews safer. And in fact, I think you could state that it is making Jews less safe, because when you claim that Israel is the land of the Jewish people and that all Jews are part of Israel, Israel is all Jews, then that does justify attacking Jews if you are angry at Israel, because you can't really have it both ways. If you say that all Jews are part of Israel, that Israel is the home of the Jewish people, then yes, it would make sense to target Jews if you're upset with Israel. So this resolution is actually making Jews less safe. And frankly, I think the concept of Zionism has made Jews less safe.
Well, you can't be criticism-proof and critique-proof and dissent-proof. And that is what many people are saying that is happening. Mark Fancher, your thoughts about this resolution, House Resolution 894, that was introduced by two Jewish Republicans. And some people are saying that this is, a quote, a cynical effort to conflate criticism of the government of Israel with anti-Semitism and to shut down dissent, shut down people having the discussion about what's happening over in Gaza right now and the West Bank, both.
Yes, it is cynical, as is the entire doctrine of Zionism. It's cynical, it's cowardly, and it's opportunistic. From the outset, it has always represented an imperialist political agenda, and it is cowardly in that it has never been willing to be upfront about that fact. It is always hidden behind religion. It is hidden behind the Jewish faith. And anytime it is threatened, anytime it is in any way criticized, then it quickly defaults to falling behind the Jewish faith and claiming that what they're doing is consistent with God's will. when in fact it is exactly against anything that the Jewish faith is about if you look at its most fundamental tenets. And I think that if we look, I wanted to return to the discussion about Pan-Africanism for just a minute. Yes, there is this natural longing for people to have security, and the best way to have it is in the form of a state that protects you. And Zionism, typical of Zionism, it comes and it says that basically we're the same as Pan-Africanists. We're doing the same thing, so therefore we should support each other. When in fact they're very different for all of the reasons that our sister has laid out, but also based on one fundamental fact. Those people who have been the victims of settler colonialism around the world, where people have gone and they've stolen their lands and they've imposed oppression on them, they are morally and in every way justified in resisting that type of oppression, that type of displacement, that type of colonization, because they're reclaiming land that they are indigenous to. Pan-Africanism is pure because it is an effort by African people to reclaim that which was taken from them. Zionism comes and it lies. It blatantly lies and says that these Ashkenazi Jews, people whose origins are in Russia and Eastern Europe and other places, that these people are somehow, through some twisted logic, through lots of lies, are somehow indigenous to the Palestinian region, and that they have a right to go in and reclaim it. And if you push them too hard on the genealogical aspect of this, then they default yet again to saying that they're spiritually entitled to it because of what the scripture says, because of prophecy. So we understand the bankruptcy of this. And unfortunately, one of the characteristics of Zionist culture has been that it has used coercion to try and impose its will. It does it through force, as we're watching in Gaza now. It does it politically through this resolution that we're looking at. It does it socially. I mean, so that in years past, when they've been upset about something that Reverend Jackson said, or they're upset about something that Minister Farrakhan has said, or whatever it is, then they don't attempt to try and change minds or to transform people, as would anyone who is a sincere person of faith. What they do is they run around to every prominent and try and force them to denounce or renounce individuals, to renounce human beings, and to say that these are bad people. You must say this. You must say this. And it represents a fundamental lack of an understanding about life and about human beings. When you try and force people to do what you want them to do, even if you succeed in forcing them to do that for the moment, you do not change them. You do not cause them to stop coming after you and to try and come out from under any type of oppression that you've imposed on them. You only intensify their resolve to try and to get you. And so the more that the Israeli government, the Israeli state, tries to force its will in Gaza, or force its will in Congress, or to force its will, it only wakes people up. It causes them to see the contradictions. And God is an amazing individual in that He understands this dynamic. And the more evil that people put out, the more the evil is exposed, and the more it brings people around to good. So the irony of all of this, including this resolution, is that it's causing people to understand more clearly exactly the bankruptcy of the Zionist doctrine and to oppose it.
Reverend Dr. Chandiri.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Leslie, your response.
Well, if you want to let somebody else respond first,
sure,
that's fine. But
sure.
I did want to say a little bit about the history of Zionism, too.
Oh, no, please, go on.
So I think yes, I would agree with what you said. I think another thing that is really key to understanding Zionism. So we talk about Zionism as though it's a movement for the Jewish people, but it was always a movement for the European Jewish people. And, political Zionism was fundamentally European. And in the pamphlet, The Jewish State, in which Theodor Herzl outlined his view, he said that Jews in Palestine will form a portion of a rampart of Europe against Asia, an outpost of civilization as opposed to barbarism. And many of the early Zionist writings talked about Africans, Arabs, and even Jews from the Middle East as being savage, primitive, only slightly more advanced than the Arabs. Not surprising that the crime rate is rising, again, talking about Arab Jews coming into Israel, given their chronic laziness and hatred for any kind of work. So this was clearly a very racist doctrine right from the beginning. And in fact, initially, the original settlers of Israel in 1948 were primarily the Ashkenazic European Jews. But they needed more people to hold the land because they had been given, in the partition, they had been given a huge slice of Palestine, and they didn't actually have enough people to hold it. So what they did was they invited, and in some cases coerced, the Jews of places like Iraq and Morocco to come to Israel. And they made all kinds of promises about how they were going to have this really wonderful life in Israel. They actually worked to make life more difficult for them in their home countries. And then when they came to Israel, they were settled along the border region. So they were in the most dangerous areas on the borders with Palestine, where the European Jews were settled more in the center. And if you notice, on October 7th, many of the young people who were killed on October 7th looked more Arab because they were descendants of these Iraqi and Arab Jews because they were settled closer to the border. Many of them who had been teachers and doctors and civil servants in their home countries were simply told, now you're going to be farmers, and given a farm and some tools and just left to manage on their own. And some of them literally starved to death or died of disease. So this is how Zionism treated non-European Jews. And there's a wonderful article by an Iraqi Jewish author, Ella Shohat, called Zionism from the Standpoint of Its Jewish Victims, that talks about that. And there's an Iraqi Jewish author, Avish Shalayim, who's become a very strong advocate of Palestinians, who writes about his family's experience immigrating to Israel. So I think that is really important for people to understand. So, Zionism, people talk about different forms of Zionism, cultural Zionism or religious Zionism. So, cultural Zionism is a little bit more like the feeling of going back to the motherland, the homeland. But it's political Zionism that we are talking about here. And political Zionism has always been racist, has always been fundamentally about establishing a little Europe within this area. Part of the reason the United States and Western countries have been so supportive is that they felt that they have this sort of toehold in the Middle East with our connection to Israel. And you notice that Israel often tries to make itself out as though it's European, that they participate in European song contests and Europe.
And that becomes
so it's as though,
the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. So there's this
the
pretense
whiteness
that it's European.
Yeah,
the whiteness.
That's their problem in their neighborhood. They're a sea of whiteness, or white proximate, and the more white proximate you are, the more, really, the more you aspire to whiteness, and that becomes the problem. And so they don't get along with anybody. And it's just a complete misappropriation, and it's an abuse of Judaism, because that's not what this is. I want to get a couple of people in. Yes,
so go ahead.
Oh no, but stay with me for a little while. I'm going to continue this conversation on the other side, on the YouTube channel. But I wanted to get Dwight McKee and Reverend Dr. Urian. Reverend Dr. Urian got a couple of minutes for you. I know a lot has been said.
A whole lot has been said, and it's important to understand this issue of whiteness. That theme has now come out. We've talked about land control and national identity. And then we've also talked about dissent. The resolution that's going through Congress is really kind of pour cold water on the expanding dissent within the chamber. Think about it. Rashida Tlaib, Congresswoman Jabhal, Omar, and the others who signed on to the push for a ceasefire, right? So this is really to kind of say within the politics of the House that if we're able to pass this resolution, anybody that would raise dissent in the deliberation about how the U.S. is going to support this land grab, I still honestly believe that this is a proof text for a land grab, that now you stifle dissent in the chamber and you reach out to a base outside the chamber who is going to buy into this notion and has bought into the notion that whiteness is a property right. And so as I am asserting my property right based on whiteness, it now allows me to take land control by force, because at the end of the day, whiteness as property and land control as property, those are synonymous terms. And anybody that comes against it, either in political speech or in religious pushback, you then get to be labeled as anti, whatever the anti is. And once I get you labeled, I can now control you and manipulate you for my purposes to continue to advance my property interests, both in terms of my identity, but also in terms of how I actually control land and resources, which has been at the root of this ruse that we've seen going on in Gaza since October the 7th.
Dwight McKee, a couple of minutes for you.
Yeah, and they don't identify with white people. They are white people. Judaism is a religion, not a race. These people are not Semitic people. The Semitic people in this conversation are the Arabics and the Palestinians. These Jews are Russian, Turkish, Jews by conversion. They didn't convert to the 6th century. And so the assumption that somehow these are Semitic people and to be against them is to be anti-Semitic is a not understanding this history. These are children of Japhet, and who has imposed themselves into the Middle East based on a land grab, redefine themselves as a Semitic people who they have no direct lineage to, at the expense of the Semitic people that already lived there. So it's a distortion of history and logic, and in many ways, religion. I guess what I do want to say, though, in closing, is that I don't think that a lot of the hubris that Netanyahu comes from his relationship with America. I don't think he understands America, United States of America. That they operate in their interest, and they will get them out there and throw them under the bus. The last time we saw the Vietnamese, they were trying to jump on helicopters because America abandoned them. The last time we saw the Afghanistans, they were chasing airplanes trying to jump on the wings because America abandoned them. It's about to happen in Ukraine the same way. United States will get these Jews out there looking for another crusade and abandon them. And the next thing they know, boy, they'll be out there by themselves being bombed by the whole Middle East. So they have to be very careful when they think that this imperial card is going to overlap in their reality over time.
Well, you know, Leslie, this is a conversation that has been we have been needing to have this for generations. But, you know, that's part of the problem with this resolution, tamping down the discussion. In the attempt to kill dissent is dangerous. It's dangerous, and it makes
it's very dangerous.
You know, I mean, and it's particularly dangerous, I think, to our Jewish brothers and sisters, because everybody will get thrown under the bus for this. I mean, when you read the comments in the following articles, it's like, whoa, wait a minute! It's like they have opened up a whole can of anti-Semitism. I have about a minute and a half.
Okay, so yes, won't deny that there's anti-Semitism, but again, you are talking, at least in the United States, of people who are white, middle class, and have a lot of privilege, as opposed to Palestinians who do not. So recently in Evanston, for example, the Equity and Empowerment Commission proposed a ceasefire resolution. The two chairs of the committee are African American women, and they were faced with a hostile, I can't think of any other word, but mob of white American, very privileged middle-class Jews attacking them, calling them ignorant, calling them stupid, calling them anti-Semitic, because they dared to raise a resolution that spelled out the truth about Palestinian oppression. And yet these people were seeing themselves as being the victims, whereas they are not truly the victims here. But I think, the other thing, many younger American Jews, every poll shows that younger and younger generations do not have this same strong identification with Zionism, that they are seeing how this violates actual Jewish traditions and doctrines, which is why we see so many young Jews demonstrating it across the country, taking over the Statue of Liberty in Grand Central Station and the Capitol Rotunda. And I was one of the ones taking over the Capitol Rotunda, by the way, saying that we do not accept this in our name. We do not accept this carnage and abuse and ethnic cleansing and genocide in the name of supposedly protecting Jews. We fundamentally reject this as having anything to do with Jewishness. So, there's definitely a sea change going on. And I think that's important for people to hear. I think these legacy institutions, the Jewish Federation, the Anti-Defamation League, people are actually leaving the Anti-Defamation League, and yet hundreds and hundreds of people have been joining movements like JDP. So I think the people at the top, and that would include people like Biden and Pelosi and Schumer and all those people, they are not listening to what people are actually saying. The vast majority of Democrats want a ceasefire. The vast majority of them believe that Israel is indeed practicing apartheid, and those leaders are not listening to what people are saying, including to what many, many, many young Jews are saying.
Well, hold on. Let's keep this conversation going on the Santita Jackson Show for just a few minutes. I know everybody's got to go today, but stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Fascinating conversation. Leslie Williams, you're part of the family now. Come back. Don't leave yet. Stay right there. Back with more. Well, go up, get on to the other side, to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, so we can continue this conversation. God bless you, everybody. Love you much. I'm Santita Jackson. Have a wonderful day. Abraham, you should have audio, sweetie, please. And a lot of people are upset about Zionism as I look at the chat line here. Do you how has your experience and your father's experience in Jim Crow, our parents' experience in Jim Crow America, and your experience as an African American, as a Black person in the United States, how has that shaped your approach? Has that shaped your approach to Judaism? I mean, as you've been disaggregating what the European Jewish perspective is, as opposed to these other perspectives of Jewish people who are anti-imperialist broadly, deeply, right?
So, we were chatting a little bit before the show started. My dad grew up in Florida in the 1920s and 1930s, which is obviously not a really great time to be a young Black man.
That's my family place. My mother's people
the same
from Florida.
place, yeah.
So and Florida,
my dad,
with all due respect, was hell on earth for Black folks.
Yeah.
It was.
My dad was from Winter Park. His brother actually did theater with Zora Neale Hurston, I found out recently.
Stop. She taught at my grandmother's school.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Oh,
there you go. Well, Winter Park was very close to Edenville, which was where Zora was from. That's right. My dad said that really the only white people in the area at that time that he felt that he could trust at all were Jewish people. Because at that time, there really was more systemic institutional anti-Semitism. There was much more hostility to Jews. There were some lynchings of white Jews in the South. I mean, not nearly as many as there were of Black folks, but, it did happen. So there was a little bit more of a commonality and a fellow feeling. And as I was saying on the radio program, as Jews, as many white Jews, like other white European groups, Italian Americans, Irish Americans, became more accepted in middle class white culture, essentially became white, they kind of moved away from their identification with, say, the labor movement and with many progressive causes. I mean, white American Jews do still vote Democratic, far more so than any other white ethnic group. But, there's sort of this mainstream liberal politics as opposed to being truly progressive and truly radical. So that shift, I think, partly accounts for this into the Black Jewish Alliance as people talk about it. And as I said on the show, I don't feel that Black people moved away so much. I feel that many white American Jews essentially got absorbed into whiteness. And, James Baldwin wrote a lot about African Americans and Jews and the perception that African Americans are anti-Semitic. And he said famously that African Americans are not anti-Semitic, they're anti-white. And what they see is the racism of the white community, which many white Jewish Americans, like many other white ethnic groups, have allowed themselves to become a part of. But getting back to Zionism, as we're saying, the primary problem with Zionism is that it is posited on the idea of an ethno-state, that you have a state which claims to be democratic, but which gives different rights to people based on their ethnicity. So if you travel in the West Bank, if you travel in places like Hebron, you see streets that literally Jewish people can walk on these streets, Palestinians can walk on these streets. Roads where people with the West Bank ID can drive on these streets, people with Israeli IDs can drive on different streets, which often has tragic consequences. There's a wonderful new book out called The Day in the Life of Abed Salama that talks about a bus accident which killed several Palestinian children. And part of the reason for both the accident and the fact that assistance was not able to arrive was because of this chaotic Kafkaesque system of who can go where, who can travel on what street, who can respond to Palestinians, who can respond to Israelis, et cetera. So it is, when we say that it's apartheid, it is not very different from the South African apartheid system, which is why Desmond Tutu and many Black South Africans have always been strong supporters of Palestine and Palestinian rights, which is
Leslie,
why...
this is why Reverend ran on that. When Reverend and Mrs. Jackson went to the Middle East in 1979, that's exactly what they saw. Not to mention the bombings. This is exactly what they saw, and they paid a hell of a price for it. Because what they ended up doing was changing the conversation in the Black church. Said, whoa, we've got this wrong. I mean, my mother was the one who challenged Andrew Young to meet with the Palestinian representative to the UN, which got him fired. She challenged him.
I
She
remember
said,
that.
oh, yeah. She came back and said, hey, Andy, my mother came back to Chicago. Then she flew to New York. She said, Andy, look, I just got back from Lebanon and from the Middle East, and I've never seen anything like this. We have got this story all, not that we have it all wrong, because Stokely Carmichael and others have been talking about it. She said, but to see it is a whole different thing. And he said, Jackie, this is the third rail of American politics. If I touch this, I will lose my job. She said, what would Martin do? And he did touch it, and he did lose his job. But it was the right thing to do. This is crazy.
And a lot of Black people have lost their jobs over this. So Angela Davis, fantastic, revelatory, rebellious leader, always a strong supporter of Palestine. She was supposed to be getting a human rights award, and there was pressure from pro-Israel groups to rescind that award. Mark Lamont Hill lost his job on CNN for advocating for Palestinian rights and some using the phrase "the river to the sea."
Honey, I got read the riot act in my Harvard interview in 1981 for that. Everybody paid a price, and they said they had to fight to get me through committee. Although I was a merit scholar, my mother was so insulted. She said, first of all, you called her. We didn't call you. She already has a full scholarship to Howard. And this woman, she doesn't need you. She doesn't need this. This has been going on for a long time. This is not new. Something happened. See right there, Leslie, in this post. In this post October 7th period, that it's like the dam has broken. I don't know, Mark. I mean, what in your estimation, what has happened in this post October 7th period, because we couldn't have this conversation before October 7th, and now this is the only conversation. This is part among the conversations people want to have.
Yeah. So,
well,
no,
hold on. I want Mark to do it before he leaves.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
yeah.
it's okay. Mark?
Sure.
Is Mark still there? He might be gone. Reverend Dr. Yearing?
It's interesting that you mentioned October. On October the 6th, all of our discussions were about Ukraine. Every one of them. There was nothing on the radar. October 7th, Ukraine has not only moved to the back burner, you don't even hear much of a discussion. It's like, let's attach whatever the interests are in Ukraine to this fight over funding for Israel. Now what you see is the attachment of funding to Israel comes at a cost. Let's think about it. This notion of how this political rhetoric around Zionism is coming with a consequence. Who gets punished for dissent? Not just in terms of the discussion, but in terms of the policy outcomes. And so while there's the resolution on one hand, there's the funding bill that's still got to come through, and pay very close attention to how the language in that funding bill ends up taking shots at those who have the audacity to criticize how this is playing out, not just in terms of the rhetoric, but in terms of the policy and in terms of the moral conflict, the moral question that's on the table, which is getting swept under the rug. And so I think this discussion is critically important.
You have enough room to get in? No, maybe put Anita.
Yes.
Okay, honey, hold on one moment because we can hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Just put yourself on. Put yourself on mute. It's okay. Reverend Dr. Yearing.
Well, that's the issue of dissent. This question, and the other part is being educated about what we are being asked to defend.
Mm-hmm.
There's this historical ignorance that is being endorsed. Don't find out for yourself what is the history of the conflict. Just respond based on how we tell you to respond, so that then we can go ahead and get the outcomes that we, whoever the we is, right? It's like we, the people in the Constitution, we keep talking about the people. I'm still trying to figure out who the hell is we. There's a we in this somewhere that isn't really being clear, and we need to be very intentional about understanding whose interests are being advanced, both in terms of what the resolution is trying to do to stifle dissent, but also in the policy, the funding, the appropriation of military weapons, the humanitarian aid, right, in air quotes, that's supposed to be moving. Those are all outcomes and derivatives of the policy position and the ideology that's attached to Zionism. And I'll go back to one more thing. Let's not forget that in Durban, remember when the issue came up that Zionism is a form of racism. When that resolution came up on the floor, the United States and Israel, their delegations, even though it wasn't really an important delegation that came from the U.S. at that time, they both walked out of that UN meeting when that resolution came to the floor. Let's not miss the historical trajectory going all the way back to where the conflict begins, but also the political responses along the way. This is the next phase of that. And we've got to understand what that really is.
And where that is where that is going, Dwight. Because I'm just, because Leslie, Dwight, I want you to jump in here. I'm wondering where that is going, because dissent, when you stifle dissent, first of all, when you can't even have the conversation, you make people angry. When you make me say what you want me to say, I mean, all of this stuff, Leslie, I see this stuff bubbling up, and it is unsettling.
So I think what is happening, and the reason so many people are upset, is because Palestinians are actually speaking out, and you're really beginning to hear Palestinian speakers and thought in mainstream media for the first time pretty much ever. But talking about dissent and education, one of the things that many people don't know, lately there's been this real glorification of the American library system. Ron DeSantis has been attacking libraries and attacking Black history in libraries and gay history in libraries. But what most people don't know is libraries have almost nothing generally about Palestine or by Palestinian authors. So I would challenge everybody listening to go to your local public library, your school library, and also any local bookstore and see, do they have any books by Palestinians? Not books about the conflict written by Americans, but books by Rashid Khalidi and Susan al-Bahawa and Noura Erakat and Ghassan Kanafani and Mahmoud Darwish and Edward Said and the Barghouti family. And my guess is that you would find almost none of them.
Well,
I've looked at the Chicago Public Library and found almost none of them.
You're not going to you're not. Just hold on one moment, because the Palestinians back in the day were the P word. First of all, you had a no-talk policy. Thank you, Henry Kissinger. You could not mention them by name. Let's get clear on the roots of this. I mean, and I know because we had to live with it. Because I know the hit my parents took and the hit that my family took over this. And people who stood up. There was a book, They Dared to Speak Out, that talked about this. When you tried to, even though Reverend put the Palestinians in the middle of his campaigns in 84 and 88, when you were negotiating, which is what you do after you finish running, you know what they call the Palestinians? The P word. And Jim Zogby was told that if you mention the P word, the room, everyone in the room will walk out and leave. This was in 1988. I mean, so now there has been a shift, because I think in the name of protecting themselves, they flexed too hard. You can't, because you can't choke people and make them. Bonnie Raitt has a song, "I Can't Make You Love Me If You Won't." You can't force these conversations, and so you're not going to find Palestinians anywhere because they've been locked out now. I mean, and people are noticing that, and they're upset about that too. But stay right there, Leslie, because I wanted Dwight to jump in. Dwight.
Yeah, and I think you've given real context to all of this, Santita, is that the stranglehold on the Palestinian community was so intense over the years that they were really non-existing people and were treated as such. You could not even have the discussion. And so what they're really trying to do now is go back to where it was. This is not new. When they talk about trying to, that you cannot create any questions about Zionism without being anti-Semitic, and you don't even have a right to raise the question, even right to criticize, they're actually trying to go back to what it was in 1980 and 1975, where you didn't have the right even to talk about Palestine without being censored, or like Andy Young being without being fired, which was why your mother was so courageous and so historic when she confronted that issue and began to communicate with Arafat and challenge Andy Young to put Palestinians into the discussions because of the power that America had in terms of veto power at the UN, and Israel had in terms of veto power in the media. Palestine, he had no voice and no voicing. And so it's very recent that the conversation has shifted. And partly it's because the information has shifted. Before, just a few media companies controlled all the flow of information. And you couldn't even, everything that you understood about Palestine was through somebody else's lens. Now, because of the internet, the access to information has expanded. So these students can read, broader interpretations. They can see international press.
Because it's not just ABC, NBC, CBS, right? Walter Cronkite.
Right. Yes.
And so now your access to information has expanded, is my point.
And you can see direct footage from Gaza. You can see people tweeting that out. You can see the Mohammed El Kurd and his sister tweeting from Jerusalem as their house is being invaded. But the fact that, I think a lot of the reaction, you're talking about October 7th, first of all, there was such an assurance within the Israeli community and also I think the Jewish American community that Israel was impregnable, that people from Gaza would fire a few rockets, one or two Israelis would get killed, then Israel would go over and dump a bunch of bombs on Gaza. They've done that 5 or 6 times since 2006. But this was the first time in a really long time that they saw significant numbers of Israeli deaths. And frankly, they were really terrified. And they were also really angry. How dare these people come out and actually kill Israelis? And people were openly saying that they wanted to kill 10 times as many Palestinians as had been killed on October 7th, which is something that they have now achieved. But also, I think for a lot of American Jews, as Dwight was saying, the narrative has been so exclusively pro-Israeli with so little discussion of the Palestinian narrative that people are fundamentally shocked when they actually hear the Palestinian narrative. And they hear it as being an attack on them personally, and so they react with outrage, hostility, and absolute determination to shut down that narrative. That's something that I saw at the Evanston Commission hearing on it last week. That's something we hear around the country as people have brought forward ceasefire resolutions or boycott, divestment, sanction resolutions. Just this over-the-top reaction of hostility to anyone who brings it up, particularly African Americans. And I would say when we're talking about people that have been fired and sanctioned and so on, it seems that it is very often African Americans who speak up. There was a case in Massachusetts a couple of years ago, a member of the local NAACP who was suggesting that there was something wrong with the occupation, that it maybe was not a good idea for American police to train in Israel. And immediately the ADL was all over him and smearing him as anti-Semitic. And we've seen that happen over and over again when anyone, particularly when anyone African American, expresses support for Palestine, that the ADL and Jewish federations, Jewish Community Council will smear them as being anti-Semitic.
But Leslie,
So,
they only come after they come after black critics, but they don't go after the white ones. Governor Huckabee
they don't
said
as
something.
much. Yeah.
No, they don't. Well, they'll tap them and then they can back up, because I saw Governor Huckabee do that. And it is racist. They're targeting the squad, and it's just like,
oh yes, they really hate the squad. They definitely hate the squad.
Well, no, they've $100 million worth. They just offered Hill Harper $20 million to run against Rashida Tlaib, excuse me. I'm like, are you for real? And now they just found a guy who they just sent to Israel, who's now going to be running against Jamal Bowman. It doesn't look. It's not a good look, Leslie. It's a horrible look.
No, it is a really horrible look. And I would say again, AIPAC, which is as we know, a major funder. AIPAC is also largely funded by Christian Zionists. So, I think when we're talking about Zionists, again, Zionists is not the same as Jews. Not all Jews are Zionists, but not all Zionists are Jewish. And I think that's also important to remember.
Oh, no, we talked about that at the top. Because, you've got John Hagee. These are the people who are populating our television
John
screens.
Hagee, yes.
Oh, yes. Just for example.
John Hagee, who said that Hitler was a good idea because Hitler drove Jews to the Holy Land so that the apocalypse could come. Yet he is featured at this pro-Israel rally in Washington, D.C. He is a featured speaker when the Jerusalem embassy was dedicated. So why would people who support Israel, presumably because they're opposed to anti-Semitism, elevate someone like that? So, it really calls into question what exactly Zionism is supposed to be about. But yes, relentless attacks on, there's also there's been something going around college campuses called the doxing van.
Yeah.
And it's a van with a little screen on it and said, these are the anti-Semites of Harvard. These are the anti-Semites of Yale. These are the anti-Semites of whatever college. And it's primarily Palestinian and other people of color who are very active in pro-Palestinian movements on campus. There's a website called Canary Mission that does the same thing. Its sole purpose is to intimidate young Palestinian activists. And, initially it would smear people in Jewish Voice for Peace, so white colleagues of mine. Mm-hmm. But more and more they realize that the people that are most vulnerable to this are young Palestinians. So you're a Palestinian who's 22, 23. You were very involved in Students for Justice in Palestine on your campus. You're on the Canary Mission page. And then when you're coming out of college and you're looking for a job, your potential employer, if he does a Google search on you, one of the first things he's going to see is the Canary Mission site that says you're an anti-Semite. And that is the only reason Canary Mission exists, is to smear and ruin the lives of young Palestinian advocates, to make sure that people don't stand up and that people don't speak out.
I guess all I'm saying is been there, done that, because I went through that 40 years ago. And it's been going, this is not new, it's been going on. And I think something has, Representative Paul Findlay wrote the book, Those Who Dare to Speak Out. And they featured Reverend Story in the book, Edward Said, blah, blah, blah. You know what? After the whole Town thing, you know what happened? I was in California with my father and he went to the synagogue, apologized, but he did share, let me tell you what my family's been through. And the story didn't actually happen the way they said it happened, but I'll get into that another day, another time. Because he did, that's not it, the way that it has been portrayed, it did not happen. That's not the way it happened. But what ended up happening was I'm riding down in the elevator in May, toward the end of the primary season, and I'm with my father and his Secret Service contingent. We're in one of these freight elevators, and, I was used to it by this time, but the person who flanked him on his right elbow was the person who carried the Uzi. Now, the Uzi is the Israeli-made submachine gun, which at that time was the most powerful submachine gun in the world, in existence. And they had, and as the Secret Service explained it to me, only a certain person of a certain mentality. They had a very specific personality type, a certain psychologist, person of a certain psychology, to handle it, because once you touched it, hundreds of rounds would go off. You just had to be wired a particular way, which was fine. And so as we're going down in the elevator, mind you, this was designed to take Reverend's campaign out. It did not do that. We're riding down Dwight and Leslie and Reverend Dr. Yui. And my father said, guess what his name is? He was pointing to the gentleman with the Uzi. I'm like, Dad, I don't know. Please, I've just gotten in the night before. I'm like, no, I don't know. I don't know everybody on this rotation. And the man looked at me and he said, why don't you tell her? And he said, my name is Jaime. And he had a very thick Israeli accent. He's Israeli American. These are the games people play. This is 1984. This is who was sent to carry the Uzi for Reverend. He said, it's just a name. And he looked at me and he just shrugged his shoulders. He said, it's just a name. He said, so many people in my country, that's their name. I said,
yeah, so a total misrepresentation.
Well, no, first of all, it was a lie. It was designed to undercut. And mind you, Reverend has been an absolute friend. But then, you know what we have to end up doing today? Well, are you an anti-Semite? I said, you know what? I was at an interview with him. This was a couple of years ago. I said, don't insult me. End of it. Stop. Don't ask that question. My father looked at me because I just jumped in it. I said, I am tired of this. Tired of it. Even I just said, I'm tired of it. I said, not when I've seen what I've seen, and you only go after white. You only go after black people. You go after Stokely Carmichael. You go after whoever. You don't go after
Angela Davis.
Else. Yeah. Angela Davis. Oh my gosh. I mean, and and all these black academicians in the Ivy League who try to stand up. And it's such a bad look. But what's good now, Leslie, is that it's now being discussed. I mean, if people can talk about it, then we can work it out. But when we can't talk about it, Leslie.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have to be able to talk about it. We have to stand up. I mean, one other thing that happened in the Senate recently that I'm not sure everybody knows about, the Senate unanimously, I mean, this is such a shock and a shame, the Senate unanimously passed a resolution that essentially equated Students for Justice in Palestine and Palestinian student activists with terrorists. And encourage universities to investigate their Palestinian student activist groups. And the ACLU condemned that resolution and actually used the word McCarthy-like. And it does really feel like a new McCarthy era in that so many, I mean, Palestinians in general, but that so many Palestinian students are suffering from that. At Niles West here in Skokie, a group of high school students, including Jewish and Muslim and Palestinian students, staged a walkout protesting what was going on in Gaza. And because the students were chanting, Israel must pay for its crimes and from the river to the sea, they were accused of anti-Semitism. And many, many pro-Israel parents showed up at the board meeting and claimed their children were unsafe because of these kids, this small group of kids chanting in defense of Palestine. So many high schools and colleges around the country, this is happening. And we have to stand up and say, we respect rights of free speech in general, but the Palestinian voice hasn't been heard. And the reason that many people are feeling uncomfortable and threatened is because they have not heard that voice. And these are not people that are calling for violence. River to the Sea is not a statement of violence. It's not a statement saying that the Palestinians want to kill all Jews or Israelis and drive them out of the country. It's saying that they want liberation, they want freedom, that every Palestinian in the entire Israel-Palestine area should be free, should have equal rights. That's what it means. That's what people mean when they chant that. And we have to push back. I mean, everyone has to stand up for Palestinians. I mean, the Democratic Party has thrown them under the bus for decades and decades, as we know, as we've discussed. I think now there are so many people who are so furious with Biden, or Genocide Joe, as people are beginning to call him, that there is a strong outcry of people saying that they are not going to support Biden in 2024. So the Democratic Party needs to listen. They need to listen to the bulk of their membership that are calling for a ceasefire and that recognize that Israel is acting as an apartheid state. And they need to find new leadership that understands that and is willing to be responsive to what so many young people, so many Democrats, and even so many young Jewish people and Jewish Democrats want, which is a fair and equitable solution that gives about Palestinians their rights, that gives Palestinians the right, Palestinian Americans the right to go and visit Palestine or to live in Palestine if they wish to, the right to reparations for all of the property that was taken since 1946. That is what Palestinians want. And the American public needs to hear that. They need to make sure that Palestine is included in the curriculum. There have also been many teachers who have been chastised or censored or in some cases fired for discussing Palestine in high school and middle school classes and curricula. And, you know, if we're giving $4 billion a year to a country, I think our kids have the right to learn why and to learn what the history and the reasoning is behind that. And if Biden can suddenly find $14 billion to prosecute this war, to give more money to Israel to kill Gazans, and yet somehow we haven't been able to find $14 billion to help with the infrastructure of our cities and our healthcare system and our education system. Why is that? Why is it that we are able to fund so much money towards a system of ethnic cleansing and apartheid, but we can't find that money to actually provide for human services here in the United States?
Well, you've got to bring the British into the discussion, because when they are still, Israel is still doing business just off the coast of Gaza with that $500 billion of gas and the oil. Yes. And that's just the gas. That's $500 billion. People forget that this is business. Raising Gaza and then regentrifying it, taking the Palestinians out, I mean, because Netanyahu did in September present a new map, the new Middle East, and Palestine wasn't on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, so
Exactly.
you
Well,
know,
they've
so
never wanted Palestine, to be honest.
no, so I
Yeah.
mean, so the kumbaya about Muslims and Jews and Christians getting together. I mean, that's nice, and I hear you. But we all know these wars are about land and resources, and people need to stop
Right.
playing this game.
It's not about religion, and many of
No.
those, discussion and dialogue groups are really a smokescreen, and they're designed to subtly get people to feel more sympathetic towards Israel. But when there's any attempt to actually discuss the political realities, those groups all break down. But Sheena, I have loved this conversation, but I am going to have to get off now. But I am so grateful to you for having me on, and I really look forward to having more
Well, you've got to
discussion.
just
with
promise
you and
me
your
that you will
listeners.
come back.
Definitely, happy to.
That's right. I mean, my little lab sister. That's right.
Indeed.
You knew all my people over there. I'm like, wait a minute.
Well,
you
yeah.
in lab?
Well, yeah.
What? These are all my folks. All my folks. You know, and I love it, and it's wonderful. And God bless you. God bless you. I mean, and many of them are leaving now. Praise the Lord. I mean, God bless them. You know, Kevin Lewis passed on, and his sister
Yeah,
Denise just
Kevin was my
passed.
classmate.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah,
remember.
Kevin was my classmate. Yeah,
And
yeah, wonderful
now,
guy.
well, his sister just passed 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Sorry, I didn't know
Denise, yeah, his
Mhm.
eldest sister, and then his brother Ramsey died a couple of years ago. So it's just been it's been a lot. It's been a lot. But you know what? I'm glad that I got a chance to connect with you, and I hope that that you will feel free to connect with me if there's anything you ever want to come on and talk about. But I'd love to have you be part of the panels because I think that you are brilliant.
Sure.
And so insightful.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for all you do. And, obviously your family has held a very special place in our family's hearts. And so it was wonderful to get a chance to connect.
Well, you hold a special place in my heart, my dear sister. And I'm excited about your journey. And thank you for sharing part of it with us because I think it can help people because people are searching. And I think that, one of your journey
Indeed.
shows us that, we should have the freedom to search and to seek and find what it is, the enlightenment that we're looking for, the enlightenment that we need. So may God bless you.
All right, you too. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Dwight McKee, you have anything? And well, Reverend Dr. Yuri, you always like to go before Dwight. So Reverend Dr. Yuri, your closing thoughts.
That's called being. I'm his hype man. I'm the setup guy.
I'm like, I think I got the order right today. You're like, no, I wonder what Big Brother Dwight has to say.
I'm the hype man. All the more important that these discussions are critical. Otherwise, what we are seeing unfold before our eyes takes place in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. There are few places to have substantive discussions about what's really going on. To invoke the political theology of Marvin Gaye, what's going on. That's really what we're seeing play out. And if we were to talk about political theology, theology has a political prism, and we've got to have the conversation. Black folk got to have the conversation, as Dr. Cohn taught us at the very early stages of developing the formalizing of Black liberation theology is God is on the side of the oppressed. And if we don't have that conversation, then what we're doing is we're giving lip service to the moment, and we are consenting to the injustice that's unfolding before our very eyes. So that's my hype. Listen to Big Brother Dwight because he's getting ready to lay it down.
Dwight McKee. Boom.
I go back to my premise that this is a major situation today, but the Israelis are betting the bank on the fact that America is got their back. And this hubris is coming from the belief that because America has been there, that America will be there. Those of us who understand the United States and how America works understand that they deal with their best interests first. And their willingness to forsaken Israel at its darkest hour is precedented by the way they've dealt with other allies historically. And that's why I said, if you remember Vietnam, and who they had put the Vietnamese out there at the expense in opposition to their own countrymen. The last real scenes you saw coming out of Vietnam was them trying to jump on top of helicopters to get out of there because America got them out there and then left them out there. When you remember Afghanistan, the last real picture that came out of Afghanistan was 1,000 people chasing airplanes down the runway, trying to jump on the wings, because America got them out there for 20 years and then abandoned them and left them dry.
Oh, when I saw that
When you
man
look at
hanging
the
off the
Shah of
wing.
Iran,
Oh Lord! I mean, you just the visual on that was like it was like, wait a minute, he's hanging off the wing of the plane. It's taking off.
because they were trying to get out of there, because America left them high and dry. When you look at the Shah of Iran, he got himself out there, believing that America would come to his aid. And next thing you know, Ayatollah Khomeini was in charge, and he was somewhere looking for Shah was somewhere looking for a home. And the same thing is about to happen in the Ukraine. Is they're going to cut the money off, and they're going to allow those people who have put their lives on the line and their countries on the line to be either slaughtered, converted, or have to run out of there. Because United States has no loyalty other than to themselves. And so these Israelis have to be very, very careful that they don't get themselves out of there. They think they're dealing with a crusade. But they will look and see that the United States will, when the politics change and the economics change and the militarism change, they will leave them out there fighting the whole Middle East by themselves. And they will be just like Afghanistan, somewhere, looking for a friend at the darkest hour. You have to be very careful when you bet the bank on the United States being loyal, because that's not what history demonstrates, just for the record.
Well, that is the story. That is the story. And I'm so glad that we had this conversation today. Leslie Williams, fascinating, brilliant mind, and tremendous journey. And I just want to thank her and you, Dwight McKee, and Mark Fancher, and Reverend Stephen Thurston, and Reverend Dr. Todd Geary, and Jeanette Wilson, and Dr. Shanita Knighton, fresh back from her sojourn and trip to teach in Saudi Arabia. I'm so glad that all of you were with us. Alex, thank you for a great show. Anita, thank you for hanging in there, but I've got to run. Sending you so much love today. Dwight McKee, thank you so much. I love you, Morning Stars. I love you, I love you, love you. Have a great one.